Hi everybody, thanks for joining me for the BPM Camp session today. My name is Lionel Palassin and I'll be your host today. So first, I will recommend you to download the content of the BPM Camp at this address that I'm highlighting here. I'm going to copy it in the GoToWebinar chat. So first, the checklist. As I said, you want to download the BPM Camp resources. Make sure you have downloaded and installed the latest version of the studio. So you can download the studio on the Bonitasoft website. If you haven't done it yet, I would recommend to get the latest, which is a 7.5.4. It will require you to have a JDK 8 running on your machine. But if you don't, the studio embed one JDK, so you should be fine. And to use the studio, we have a web-based component in the studio, and to run them, I would recommend to use Chrome or Firefox to avoid any issue. It works pretty fine with IE, but just to make sure it works better with Chrome or Firefox. Also, the session is recorded, so it will be available for all of you at the end of the session. And finally, if you have any issue hearing me, don't hesitate to let me know by typing in the GoToWebinar question. So today's agenda. First, I will give you a bit of an overview about what is BPM, what are the objectives of BPM. BPM stands for Business Process Management. Then we will go straight to the core of the session, and I will present you the different components of the Bonita BPM platform. Then I will give you an overview of the BPMN 2.0 notation and trying to give you a first look at the main element of that notation that we're going to use today. Then we will talk about how to manage data in the processes you will build, how to add forms, or how to build the UI, how to define the actors of your processor, of your process, how to connect your process to external system, and finally we will finish by showing you how you can build an actual business application based on the BPM methodology using the Bonita BPM platform. And I will give you a quick tips about how to deploy a Bonita BPM based application. So first, the goals. Basically, give me 1 second here. Basically, the BPM is here. It's a methodology that lets you design the process that run your application. And basically, the methodology is here to ensure that each task of a process will be performed in the right order by the right person and in a timely manner. Basically, we will guarantee that the process can be reproduced efficiently, and based on that execution, the reproduction of the execution, we will be able to track where the bottleneck, where we can optimize the process to ultimately improve the global business application. So in the Bonita BPM platform, we have 3 main components: the Bonita Studio, the Bonita Engine, and the Bonita Portal. The Bonita Engine and the Bonita Portal are together because the engine is actually by default embedded in the portal, so the portal runs the engine. And the two combined, we call it the Bonita platform. This is where you will execute actually your business application, where the Bonita Studio is kind of like the development studio where the developer will have to design the processes, build the UI, and basically build every single component of the business application. So let's take a deeper look to all of those components. First, the Bonita BPM Studio. It's basically where you will design the backend of your application using the process-based approach. So here in the studio, which is a desktop application, it is based on Eclipse, for those who are familiar with the Eclipse IDE. And basically, you will be able to drag and drop, so design visually the process that run your application. So here on the left, you will have a palette with all the different BPMN elements, and you will be able to drag and drop them to design in the main screen your diagram. And you can make it as complex as you want. And for each single task or each single element, when you select it, you will be able to configure it. So basically, you can design the process and implement it within the same environment. So you will see during the exercise that we're gonna work a lot today with the Bonita Studio, that you can do a lot. You can design the process, you can connect it with external system, you can design the UI part for each single task, you can define who is assigned to each task, you can manage the data model used by your processes and so on. Second, a main component of our Bonita Studio suite is the UI designer. So it's a web-based component. Is using AngularJS and Bootstrap to generate basically forms. So similar to what we have on the Bonita Studio, we will have a designer view. That's the one you see a screenshot here. Basically, the screenshots show how the designer look when you're actually editing a form. So in that case, you can see that in the main view, we already have a title on our form. We have a container with 2 tabs. We have different widgets. We have an action button and so on. On the left part of the designer, we have a palette where different widgets are available, and you can, similar to what we have in the studio, you can drag and drop them to the main view to build your form. On the bottom part of the screen, you can manage the variables that are declared and managed at the UI level. So in that case, it will be a JavaScript variable. And on the right part of the screen, you will be able to configure the current selected element. And you can build a responsive UI by basically choosing what device you will run your form to basically adjust the size of different widgets to customize it depending on the device the form will be displayed. Third main component, the Bonita BPM engine. So that's basically the core of the platform. It's the part that is in charge of executing process. So it's really the backend of the platform. It will run the application basically. So there is no really built-in UI to interact with it. It, however, expose a layer of different APIs that are available and through REST. So we have a REST API layer, we have a Java API layer, and we have a HTTP API layer. So you can basically build your own client if you're interested to manage the Bonita BPM engine. By default, the client for the engine will be the Bonita portal, which is a Java web application that I will present right after this slide. Just to give you a couple of technical details, so it's based on Java 8. I think there's a typo here, it should be Java EE 7. It's packaged with the Bonita portal, and to run, it has to be deployed in a Java application server, such as Tomcat or Wildfly, and it needs to have a JDBC compliant transactional database to store its data. It's a stateless engine, so all the data will be always synchronized in the database. The Bonita BPM portal, so I kind of like to see it as a default business application that we provide out of the box, but with more functionality, especially for administrator and process owner. So first, about the default end user, we have an interface that looks like this screenshot. So here you can see that as Ellen Kelly, I'm connected as a user, and I can see the task list that I'm a candidate to. So I can click on any task and display the form associated with this task within the Bonita portal, and basically interact with the different processes that run on my platform using the Bonita portal. So you can manage your task, you can create a new case. A case, just for the vocabulary, is an instance of a process. So you can create new case, you can comment task, you can see the overview of a case, and so on. So basically give you basic functionality for the end user to interact with your processes. Within the same portal, you will be able to switch profile and to assign profile to different users. By example, the administrator profile will be the one who is in charge of managing the organization of the platform. So basically, all the users that can access the portal, give them rights, put them in different groups with different roles, and so on. As an administrator, you will be able also to deploy new processes. So to make the processes available to the user, you have to deploy them into the portal. You will be able to configure the process and to give access to a specific user to specific processes. And if you have advanced version of the Bonita portal, the subscription version, you will also have tooling to monitor the activity on your platform, basically being able to track the execution of your processes and also handle any error that can happen on the processes. So basically play the role of like the IT administrator on the business platform. Within the same portal, I quickly show you an example in the last slide was how to display a form in the portal. So basically, all the form that you create with the UI designer and that are associated with tasks in your process will be rendered by the Bonita portal. So in the case of the previous screenshot, we add the overview of the task list, and on the right part of it, we show the form associated with my task. You can also display that form in a full screen, or you can basically embed that form directly in a complete external application if you don't wish to use the Bonita BPM portal. So it's pretty flexible here, and I will give you more example of that during the BPM Camp. And finally, the final objective is to build a business application using that Bonita BPM portal. So quickly, a business application is basically composed of a set of processes. Each processes will be will come up with their own configuration, with their own forms. Plus, you will be able to add pages. So here we can see we have a view of a page basically, and those pages will integrate processes to basically provide business functionality for an end user. What is interesting about the application is that even though it's hosted on the Bonita BPM portal, it's completely independent from it. So you will have your own UI, your own look and feel. You will be able to have your own URL to access to it. You can define who has access to what in your application and so on. So that's basically your exercise today, is to build an application from scratch. So you will see we have 6 different exercises that will lead us to that, where we're going to start by building a process and then improve that process step by step by adding different components to that process. And finally, based on that process, we will build an app, and that will give you a good idea of what you can do with the Bonita BPM platform. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about BPMN 2.0, which is a notation that is used by the Bonita Studio to design processes. So just a little bit of a history. BPMN 2.0 has been here for several years now. It's defined by the Object Management Group, which is a consortium that standardize notation. They are, by example, the one who came up with the UML back in the day. So they also defined BPMN 2.0, and now they're also working on CMN, DMMN, and so on. So they working on a lot of different standardized notation, which is great because it means that different vendors can all implement their own version of the notation, but we are all compatible between each other because we are based on the same standard. So that's one of the benefits. And that's a standard defined between other things, the shape and the different elements of the BPM notation. So by example, a circle in the BPM standard will stand for an event. So we can have a start event, we can have an end event, but we can have many different events. And a rectangle will define an activity. So in that case, just to keep it simple here, we will talk about the human task, which is an activity where we will require a physical person to interact with the process, and a service task or automatic task where we won't need any human interaction. The process will be executed, the task will be executed automatically. The standard doesn't define color, so Bonita came up with their own color. So we chose green for start event, we chose red for the end event, and we chose light blue for the task. All those different key elements will be bundled together inside a pool. A pool basically will represent a process. So within the same diagram in the Bonita Studio, you can have different pools. So you can have define multiple processes within the same diagram. But when you export them, it will create you one process file per pool. And finally, the elements are linked together by transition, which is a small error. Second thing, the gateways. Basically, the gateways are at the base of the business logic of your process, because they're the one who are you will be using to define if the process should take one flow or one other flow based on a business rule. So here we have three different types of gateways. We have the exclusive gateway, we have the parallel gateway, and we have the inclusive gateway. So let's take a moment to explain those different gateways. So let's see if I can use a pen here. Yes. So first, the exclusive gateway, it's represented by X in my gateway. So the flow will come this way from the start event. It will reach out my gateway. And in a case of an exclusive gateway, we will have to choose only one output flow. So when you define a process, the studio will ask you to define one default flow, which means that if any of all the other output flow doesn't return true, so you can define condition on the output flow. If any of them return true, if none of them return true, the default flow will be taken. The default flow will be represented by a cross line in the flow. And on the other flow, you will be able to define a condition. So it can be anything. Basically, let's say you have a process to register someone for a driver license, for example. You will require the person to enter his birth date. And if he's under, let's say, 16 years old, you will go through a specific flow to reject his request, for example. So you will be able to check based on the age. So that's one simple example, but you can have a lot of different examples. So here we'll have one flow. Let's say equals the condition return true. So the flow, the process goes through that branch, and it comes here. And here we'll have another exclusive gateway. So we usually recommend to place the gateways in a parallel order. And here the exclusive gateway, just wait for one input to continue. So that's for the exclusive gateway. That's by far the most used. Let's take a look now to the parallel gateway. So the parallel gateway will be represented by a plus. And how the name indicates, when the flow comes in, we have no condition on the parallel gateway, all the output branch will be activated. So the process will run in parallel. So in that case, if I have two human tasks here, I will have to wait for the two humans to execute their task before continuing. So let's say we have the task 1 here, and we have the task 2 here. Task 1 is executed first. It will come, reach out the next gateway, and here we recommend to put another parallel gateway to close the parallel branches. Basically, the parallel gateway will wait for all the inputs before continuing. So you will wait until the task number 2 is executed. And we can continue. So parallel gateway will activate all the output transition, and when used as a multiple input, it will wait for all the inputs to come in before activating the outputs. And finally, the inclusive gateway. So it's represented by a circle. So that one is less used. So again, we recommend to use them as input and output. And that was it's interesting. It's kind of a mix between exclusive and parallel. So when you get one flow coming in, the inclusive gateway will activate all the transitions that return true for their condition. So you can define condition on any branches. Let's say you have like 3 transitions, and those 2 return true. So those 2 are activated. When used as an input, the exclusive gateway will know which branches have been activated by the previous one. So you will wait only for this one and this one. This one, you won't wait for it. So that one is a direct transition. So we will go straight to the gateway, and all we will wait for will be the execution of this task. When it comes in, the output transition will be activated. Hopefully it makes sense for the different gateway. We will use them during the different exercise, though don't worry if you didn't follow all of it. Okay, so now it's time for the first exercise. So hopefully you downloaded the instruction, you got the Bonita Studio up and running, and you're ready to begin with the exercise. So let me show you how it looks like. So first, let's take a look to the studio. So here we have the studio. To create a new diagram, you just have to click on New Diagram. It will give you the opportunity to create a new diagram. I have a small issue with that thing. Keeps having that. Let me erase. Yes, good. Okay, that's better. So that's the studio that we will use for the first exercise. And as far as the instruction, they look like that. So you should, hopefully you manage to download them, you don't have any issue. If you do, please let me know, I will try to give them to you. So you will just scroll down to first the preface, so that will give you an overview of what we're trying to achieve today. We're basically going to build a business application to manage leave requests. So we have a pool of employees, they all want to take vacation, and we have managers who needs to validate the vacation. So basically, it's a pretty simple process, right? The employee will create a new request, and the manager will get a notification, and he will either accept or reject the request. So we really keep it simple for the BPM camp. And we will see, like during all the exercise, how we can simply build the application step by step. So the first exercise. So first, quick look on the environment setup. Hopefully you all managed to get your Bonita Studio up and running. Please let me know if you didn't. That would be too bad to struggle with the Bonita Studio during the exercise. You have a web browser. So please take a minute to read the instruction to get your environment up and ready. And then let's take a look to the first exercise, modeling a basic process. So what we want to do here is, at the end of the exercise, have the complete diagram of our process. So you will have to create a new leave request diagram, a version 1.0, containing a leave request process. And you will have to add those different BPMN elements to get at the end something that look like, should have it somewhere. I went a little bit too fast. Yeah, it should look like that at the end. So you will see, don't worry, you have like the step-by-step instruction that should drive you through the exercise. So yeah, you should be able to do it on your own. So what I would do is I will leave you about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to go through that exercise, and at the end I will show you how I would do it, and then I will answer any question you might have, and we will continue from there. So I will see you in about 10 minutes if no one is blocked. So I'm gonna send again the link. Look like some people didn't get it. Okay, so I copy the link again in the chat. Okay, so you should be able to have the link. Please let me know if you don't. I can copy it here. Look like that. If I write it, I download the BPM Camp, of course. All right, I will give you about 10 minutes and then I will connect back. All right, so hopefully you guys managed to make a good progress. I'm gonna do the exercise myself so you can follow up with me in any case. So basically I'm gonna follow the instruction here. So basically we want to build a process for our leave request. So that basically the process that will be at the core of our business application, that will be the backend of our business application. So I created a new diagram. So the first thing I need to do is to rename that diagram. So I can either go through the menu or I can go directly here and rename my diagram. Okay, and I'm gonna call it leave request. Okay, now what I need to do is rename the start event to field request. And rename the task into validate request. So basically here we see that when the process will begin, we will have the information about the request, and then we will have a human task for someone to approve or reject the request. And based on the decision, we will take a different flow. So we're going to have a gateway to represent that, an exclusive gateway. So here I can change to exclusive, and we're going to call it is approved. So basically here we will have the business logic to know if the reviewer accepted or rejected the leave request. And we will have two different service tasks based on whether the request has been accepted or rejected. So for now, those tasks won't do nothing. So it's always good to draw your diagram so it looks kind of nice. It's easier. It's more readable, especially when you start like a big process. So we have our two service tasks, and one is going to be notify request approved, and one's going to be, so let me see if the approved, yeah, the approved is at the bottom. So that one's going to be request rejected, and this one is going to be notify request approved. So basically here we can picture that those tasks will notify, let's say by email or any other mean, the initiator of the request to let him know that whether the request has been approved or rejected. Then we will have two end events. One to say that in that case the request has been rejected, and here the request has been approved. Okay. That's good. And now we can save. The only thing is, if we don't want the studio to show us an error, we need to define default value for the transition. In that case, that transition will be called yes. So the reviewer said yes, and we're gonna return here. We're gonna say true. So for now, I just add a default value. So we return always true. That means that the request will always go through that transition. And here we say that the default flow. So now I can validate my my process. So I have an issue with the screen sharing. The resolution is not good. Let me see if I can fix that. How I can do that. Basically, I need to validate the request. So just to access the menu, I need to drag my Bonita to the other screen. So basically, you go to diagram and you click on validate, and it will validate the process. So now I get rid of the error. Now we should be good. It's saved, and I can run it. So the process will be automatically deployed in a Bonita portal. So that's something I didn't mention, but the Bonita Studio by default comes with a Bonita portal. So he has his own Tomcat running in the Bonita Studio with his own database and all the component needed for the Bonita portal to run. And when you click on run, basically he start up the Tomcat, he deploy the process, and he display you the instantiation form. So as you can see, it's a temporary form that is automatically generated for testing purpose. So we didn't define any form yet. We just run the process. We already have a default UI, so we can see that that will be the place where we will actually define a form for the initiator to enter the information about the leave request. But for now, we have no information. So I'm just going to start and see as a Walter Bates that I have a task, which is basically the validate request task that was defined in my diagram. Same thing here. So I can take the task. So I say I assign the task to myself. And it's again a temporary form generating for the testing. And here, if I execute, the case is finished. And I can go as an administrator to check my cases. And here, under the archived, I can see my cases. So I can information about the case, but in the community edition, the information are pretty limited about what happened to the case. But we can know that it's completed, and it has been completed at 170. Okay, so that's pretty much all for the exercise, for the first exercise. Let me confirm that. Yes, we have not much in that exercise. So pretty straightforward. Hopefully you all managed to to do it with success. I'm gonna take that back here. So I have a question. Why is the start event called field request? Shouldn't there be a user task for the employee to submit the request? The diagram you created suggests that the employee is outside the scope of a process. Can you please comment on variation in the process model? That's a good point. So it's basically how you want to design the process. So the question is why the start event is called field request and why this is not a human task like the validate request. The way I see it is that when the event that will initiate a new case, a case in that case is a new request, a new leave request, will be triggered by the employee itself. So the employee will go to the portal or to the business application, if there is one, and say, well, I want to create a new instance of a leave request. And basically, the information to initiate the request will be the leave request information. So we could have a start event with no forms by just choosing here. A small issue here. Here. I could say, well, I have no forms. So in that case, it won't ask me, it won't display a form, and add another human task where we display a form where the initiator or the employee can add the information. But what if the employee changes his mind and you want to cancel the request because maybe he doesn't have the right information yet, or he's not sure? So it basically displays the form. You say, oh, well, I didn't know I had to enter that information. You want to cancel it. If you have a task already within the process, the process will already be initiated. You will have an instance of that process. So in the process, you will have to handle the fact that the employee changes his mind and he just close the form. So basically, to destroy the case where if you have the form on the start event, if the user changes his mind and you just close the browser, no instance will have been created. So it's easier to manage. So it's basically how you want to handle the use case. Both cases are valid, but in that particular use case, I decided to put the form to enter the initiation information on the start event itself. Hopefully that answers the question. Okay, for those of you who didn't manage to finish the exercise, don't worry. Within the exercise correction, there is correction. So if you import, so let's see where I put it. I forgot. Okay. Give me 1 second. Just gonna get the correction. So the correction are in the zip file that have been provided. Okay, and here you can browse it basically. So if I click on browse and I go to my desktop, if you expand the BPM Camp, you have the correction, and basically those both files are archive that contain the process. So if you want to start, and when you want to start the exercise 2 and you didn't finish the first exercise or you're not sure about what you did, you can just import the 1.0 correction and start from that one. Okay, let's go back to the slides. And let's talk a little bit about data and forms. So first, the data. As you probably already see, a process without data doesn't do much. To interact with the process, we want to enter information. We want the process to use this information to take a decision, and we also want to read information and make decision based on those information. So it's basically what process in a company is about. So to manage data in the Bonita BPM platform, we have three different type of data. The first one and the main one is the business data model, also known as a BDM. It's basically a data model based on object-oriented design. So you will be able to design objects, create relationship between those objects. Each object will have attributes and so on. And this data model will be stored in its own database schema, what we call the business database. So at the end, when you have the Bonita BPM platform running and you have a BDM defined, you will have two database schema, one for the runtime, so used by the engine to store execution information, runtime information, and one for the BDM, or the business database, where you will have all the information related to your business. So we really separated the two worlds. So just a quick use case for the BDM, if we want to store any kind of data manipulated by instance. In the case of a leave request, we will want to store the information related to our leave request. So when the leave request has been initiated by who, what are the start date, number of days of the leave request, for example. Second type of data is process and step data. The process data will be at the pool level. It means that you will define data that will be available through the entire life cycle of a case. And the step data will be defined at the task level, the activity level, and that data will be available through the entire life cycle of the task. The process and step data are stored in the engine database, in the runtime database. And they are not used really to store business-related information. They are mostly used either in gateways. So let's say you compute data and you return the result in one of the activity, and you want to test against that data in one of your gateway. You will store the result of your computing in a data. Another use case would be to chain connector execution. So you have one connector that goes through a web service, get data, and you want the next connector to use part of this data as an input. You will store temporarily in a process or step database. To come back on the BDM will be accessible from anywhere in your platform. It's not tied to a case execution. A case can create a new instance of a new object, new instance of an object in your data model, but another process can read it, update it. The process that instantiates the business object might be finished, but the business object will remain. And the last one is the form data. So that one will be accessible only on the client-side level on your browser. Mainly, it's JavaScript data. And it's basically used to build the behavior of your forms and pages. So if you want to to modify the display or to tweak a little bit how information are displayed on the form. You might get information from the engine or from the BDM. You might want to process them at the client-side level to display before displaying them to the user. So let's take a look to a little bit more in detail about all those different types. So the BDM, as I said, is structured object, so it's based on the object-oriented model. Every attribute of a object will be either Java primitive, so string, integer, boolean, date, and so on, or a relation to another BDM object. So you can either define a composition relation or an aggregation relation between your objects, and that will be reflected directly in the database structure. So yes, another thing about the BDM, when you actually define your data model objects, when you run the process, the schema will automatically be created by the engine for you. Second one is the process and task data. So in that case, it will be any serializable type. So primitive collection are serializable, custom types, and you can come up with your own Java class for this one. I wouldn't recommend it though, because the custom type will be stored as blob in the database. So in terms of performance and reporting, it will be really hard to manage. Finally, form data, as I said, is any JavaScript type, so it's pretty flexible on this side. Finally, last one that I didn't really talked about yet is the document. So obviously, in the business process, we want to manage documents. So Bonita BPM comes with a basic document management. So you can define documents on your process. You can have widget to upload document from a form and store them in the process. The document will be stored in the engine database, and you will be able to reference them in the BDM. And you have widget also to display the documents that are stored in Bonita in your forms. But the document management in Bonita, it's simple, easy to use, but not really advanced. If you want to store a lot of documents or do advanced management, I would recommend to plug Bonita with a real CMS, content management system. Contract. So another interesting concept in Bonita, one I really like, is the contract that allow us to separate the layers in our applications. So in this case, you will be able to separate the UI from the backend by defining a contract either at the process level, so when you want to instantiate a new case, or at the task level, when you want to execute a task. So what is it exactly? So it's basically in the studio, let's say you want to define a contract to execute a human task. You will define a set of inputs. So let's say for the leave request, the set of input will be the start date and the number of days. So it will be a date and an integer. So you will say that to process the task, I'm expecting the client to send me those information when he's trying to execute the task. So if those are not provided, the engine will reject the execution request. So it's really interesting because you can build your process logic by assuming that you will have all the data you are expecting from the client. So you don't have to worry about getting this data or not. You know you will be here when the task is executed. And on the other side, when you develop your front end, you will know what is expecting from the backend. So you just have to make sure that you provide those information, and you don't have to worry about anything else. So really interesting concept that we will work on in the next exercise. And it's right now. So here's the exercise number 2, where we're gonna define our first data model and create contract on the process instantiation part and on the task execution part. So let's take a look to the exercise. Exercise number 3. So here basically what we're gonna do is set up a business data model and specify contract for the case instantiation and the human tasks. So here is our leave request object. So we'll have 4 attributes. So that will be our business data model, basically, just one object. We keep it simple. And we will have 2 contracts. One of the case instantiation. So that's basically the one I was talking about. Leave starts, but we'll have one business rule saying that the leave start must be a future date. So we'll have to understand how we do that. And the number of days for the request. And in that case, another business rule, it has to be strictly greater than 0. So really interesting, because now as a process developer, I know that I will get those data and I can use them when I develop my process. And the second thing is on the validate request task, we will have one boolean, which is approved. So again, we have the step-by-step instruction. Don't forget to duplicate the process diagram from the previous exercise. If you didn't finish it, import the correction before you start working on the new version. Again, I will give you between 5 and 10 minutes, and then I will do the correction with you. Again, if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask them in the chat. Okay, so hopefully everybody managed to finish the exercise. I'm gonna take some time to do it with you. I'm gonna put that on the side. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna open the studio. So first we need to duplicate this one. So again, I have an issue with the share screen. I just have to scroll down that back and forth, being able to click on duplicate, and we're gonna create version 2.0 and start from here. So first we need to create the data model. So I can close this one. So same thing for the data model. I need to go here. What's going on? Okay. Development, business data model. Okay, and here we're gonna create a new object called leave request. We're gonna leave request, and we're gonna add 4 attributes. So requestor ID, type long. Oops, my bad. Gonna open again. I type enter twice. So we're gonna make it mandatory. Then we're gonna create leave start, which is a date only. It's gonna be mandatory. Then day count, which is gonna be an integer. It's gonna be mandatory too, and then is approved. To track if the request has been approved or not, it's gonna be a boolean. A quick word on the date. Here you can see you have 3 different date type. It's basically to manage the time zone or not. So date only won't have any time component, so it will only be the date. And for the 2 date time we have with the time zone or no time zone, it basically means that if you want to store the time zone information or not. So it will depend on your use case, and with those 3 options, you should be able to cover all of them. So now I can click on finish and click on OK to deploy my BDM. Then I'm gonna create an instance of this object in my process. So I click on the pool and I click on data. Then here on business variable, I can add a new business variables. So I'm gonna call it request and click on finish. Okay, so we have our placeholder for the request. And now we want to set up the contract for the case instantiation. So for that, I just have to select the pool and go to execution and navigate to contract. Here, I can expand that a little. Here, I'm gonna have to click on add from data. And basically, I will be able to select from my object the data I want for my contract. So I'm gonna choose live start and day count and click on finish. Click on OK. So I'm telling me that some attributes of the business variable will not be initialized by the contract, and they are mandatory. So basically the requester ID. So I have to take care of that. But first, I'm gonna finish my contract part by adding the different constraints that we mentioned earlier. So the first one is to make sure the live start is a start in the future. So we're gonna call it live start is future. I'm gonna copy the expression. Okay. And have a message saying live start must be in the future. Okay. I'm gonna add a second constraint to say at least one day, where we're gonna check if the request input is actually greater than 0. Okay. And we're gonna say in that case, day count must be greater than 0. Okay. So I have my constraint defined. And now I can go back and take care of the missing attributes. So I'm gonna open again the business variable, and here we can see that we have a default value script. So it's basically a script that will be executed when the data is initialized. So in that case, because it's at the pool level, when we create a new instance of that process, we create the variable, and the script is executed to initialize the variable. So we're gonna modify that a little bit to add the requester ID. So basically, you can see that some information are already present, and it's basically because when I define my contract, the studio automatically generated for me the default value script based on the contract value. And here I can just add those lines. So basically what it does, it's get the current process instance, so that the one we just created, and it gets the ID of the person who initiates the request and store that in the requester ID. Okay. Then we're gonna define the contract on the validate request. So here we just need is approved, and it's a Boolean. Okay, I can save that. Then I need to add an operation. So basically what I want to do is store the results of is approved. So I'm gonna select my object, and here I can select one Java method, and I'm gonna use a set is approved. And on the right operand, I'm gonna use the value returned by the contract. So basically, we store the value returned by the client inside my BDM object. And finally, we can use the business data model object to control the execution of my guy here. So instead of having true here, I can use a Java method is approved. So if the request is approved, the process will go through that transition. If not, it will go through that transition. Okay, now we saved and we can run the process. So here I have my process. I can add a date. So for now, we don't have any fancy widgets, so we have to type them. So basically, it's still the temporary form generated automatically. And the interesting thing here is that the form is generated based on the contract. So you can still test your process as a process developer without doing anything on the UI side. You just define your contract, and the studio take care of generating the form for you. So really interesting for testing purpose. So I'm gonna add a start date in the future and add the count. We can start it, and here I can approve it. So here I have to say true, and we go through it. Let's see if we have. So here, if you click on development and business data model, you can browse the data. So you basically open your H2 console. Basically, on the studio, the Bonita portal run on the H2 database, which is an in-memory database. And here we can have actually a view on our BDM. So we can see we have one table called leave request. And you can select the data to see how the data have been stored in your BDM object. So it's pretty good for developers to debug also what happened. Good. We're running a little bit behind, so I'm gonna move on to make sure that we have time to cover everything today. Again, if you have questions, don't hesitate. I will take time to answer them. But for now, I'm just gonna move on a little bit so we can have time to spend time on the exercise and really go deep in how to build business application with Bonita. So the next chapter is the form and pages. So how now it's becoming interesting to see how we actually gonna build the UI, so we don't have this usable, not really user-friendly testing interface. We actually want to have a real widget. We want to customize our interface to make it efficient for the end users. So for that, we're gonna use the UI designer. So again, it's a web-based designer that will let you design your pages by adding containers and widgets. So we'll see we have a library of widgets that you can use to define your form and pages. I'm saying form and pages because it's basically the same thing from the UI designer perspective. You can build form and pages the same way. The only difference is where it's used. The form will be used to interact with the process. So either a form, an instantiation form will be used to instantiate a new case. A task form will be used to execute a task. Where a page is not linked to a specific process, it will be used more in an application. So an application can still integrate forms within a page, or you can integrate action button that will interact with a process, but it's not linked directly to a process. So that's the main difference. If we go back to forms, we have two types of forms, the editable form, so again, process instantiation and human task, and the overview form. It's a read-only defined at the pool level to give you an overview about a specific case. And both of those form and pages are based on the same technology, AngularJS and Bootstrap. This is what we provide by default. If you don't want to use that, you're not obliged to. You can build the UI using any technology you want. You can build, I don't know, using React if you want, and integrate the engine through the REST API. Really easy to do. There is no obligation to use any of the components, so it's completely up to you. So as I said, forms and pages will be composed of widgets. So we have a set of widgets available out of the box: text field select, date picker, upload widgets. We have a good library in the community edition. We have more advanced widgets on the subscription edition. And we also provide a tooling to create your custom widgets. So this tooling is available directly in the UI designer, so you can build directly in the web browser your custom widgets. You need to know a little bit about AngularJS because in that case you're actually coding the widget. But also we also provide on the community website a tooling outside the UI designer to build your custom widgets if you want to build them in the real IDE and share them to through version control and so on. So there are a lot of options on the table. So here we are, exercise number 3. So the exercise you see goes quickly. We want to spend most of our time on the exercise today. So in that case, the exercise will be to create the form. So let me exit that one and display the exercise. So what we're gonna do here is to create form for the instantiation and form for the validate request task. So the form for the instantiation will give you the ability to choose a date and to provide the number of days. And the form for the validate request will display the information about the request, the leave request, and give the ability to either approve or reject the request. I will let you about 10 minutes to do it yourself. Again, if you didn't manage to finish the exercise number 2, please import the correction from the zip file and duplicate it to create the 3.0 version. All right, I see you in about 5 to 10 minutes. All right, so hopefully you all managed to get through that exercise. I'm gonna take a few minutes to go through the exercise myself. So that one is a little bit longer. And we're basically gonna work with the UI designer in that one. So let me first duplicate my diagram. I'm gonna create the version 3.0. Okay. So here it is. And we're basically going to create 2 forms. So the first one is the case instantiation form. So to open the UI designer, you just have to select your pool and go to the execution tab. And here you select execution instantiation form and click on the little pen. And that will open the UI designer in the browser. So I can display it here. And by default, we see the the form generated by the studio. So that's great. We first gonna rename this guy. So I'm gonna call it field leave request. Save. Then, so it's technical name. Don't worry about it too much, but make sure it doesn't contain space or special character. Then we're gonna update the form title. So here we have a form title by default. We don't want that one. And we're gonna call it field a new leave request. So you can see on the right panel, we actually have the information about the current selected item. So I'm gonna change the properties of that widget. So you can see here it's a widget. Here I have another widget. Here I have another widget. And here I have a container. So it's pretty intuitive, pretty straightforward. And you just have to select them and modify the attribute of each of them to basically design your form. Then I'm gonna update the widget for the day count. So I can select the widget here. And I'm gonna change the label to say number of days. So I'm basically following the instruction. I'm gonna change the placeholder. Placeholder is the text that displayed in the widget itself, as you can see. To give information about what you have to enter in the widget. And we're gonna change the min value to say 1. So basically, if you enter not 1, it will complain. If you enter like -1. So we have some sort of like double validation here. We have a validation at the form level that we want a positive value for the number of days, and we also have validation on the process level. They don't have to. It's up to the front developers if they don't want to go through the backend to get the error and he wants to manage the validation directly at the client side. It's completely up to the developers to make decision, architecture decision. Yeah. But at least the product provide the ability to do one or the other, or both of them. Then number 6 is clear the initial form values. So I have to select my form input. So you can see like I have a default variable here. I have form input and form output. Again, it's based on my contract. And I'm gonna change this one. And I'm just gonna copy what I got from the exercise. So it's pretty similar, it's just changing to null. And I'm gonna add a new variable to store the errors in case I get error from the backend. So I'm just gonna call it error and leave it as a string, empty string. And I'm gonna update my submit button to store the results of the backend if the backend return an error. So on the failed response value, here I have different attributes for my button. Basically, I can choose the action. So I have a different action available. Here I want to start a new process. So I give the process ID. We return the data sent on click from output. So that's what we sent to the server. And remember the contract. We have to return leave start and day count. So that's what we return basically, because here we return the content of the request input. So we are good. And I want to store the fail response value in my error variable. And finally, I want to display the error. And for that, I'm gonna use a text widget. So here, and I'm gonna change this guy to say error. So here I basically code on using HTML because that widget, as described, can evaluate HTML code. And I want to display that widget only if we have an error. So I'm gonna make this hidden attribute dynamic. And I'm gonna add the CSS class to say text danger. So basically it's a bootstrap attribute that will display the text in red. If you want to get more information about Bootstrap, you can go to getbootstrap.com. And here, if you go here, you have all the explanation of the Bootstrap CSS. So you can just explore the documentation and use the CSS class in the UI designer to make your form more interesting. So now I am good on the form side. I can check using the preview how it look like. Here I have my widget. I can here say, oh, if I use -1, it says it's too small. Use something bigger. And if I submit, nothing happened because I am not deployed in the portal yet. Okay. So I can close this one. And create the form for the validate request task. So I'm gonna go back to my studio, select the validate request, and do the same thing, execution, form, and click on the little pencil here to open the default form. So we're gonna rename that form in validate leave request. Okay. Then we're gonna remove the unnecessary variable. So we don't need the form input and form output here. We're gonna make it more simple. So you also show you like how you can use what has been generated, or you basically do the way you want to code it. As long as you respect the contract, you can do whatever you want. So first, to display the information about the request, I need to get the business data related to that leave request. So for that, I'm going to create a new variable, and we're going to use a external API. So basically, I can use REST API provided by the Bonita engine, and I have the dynamic link stored in my context variable. So it's a bit complex here, but when you generate a new form for a task, the studio will provide you some helpers, so variables that return you general information about the task, and one of them is the context. So basically, the context will contains the URL to access the different business objects managed by your process. And in that case, you just need to know the syntax, but basically context will return the variable like that. So it's going to be basically context dot the name of the variable in your process. Remember, in the studio, we declare the data here called request. So we use that name, request underscore ref slash dot, I forgot, dot link. Okay, so you just have to know about it. And basically, dot link will get the link to the direct access to the variable, and therefore we will have our objects in the request variable. Then we're gonna get the information about the requester. So here we're gonna use another REST API call. In that case, we are not using the context, but we are going straight to the API exposed by the engine, so identity, user, and I get the ID of the user by exploring the request object. Okay. So for documentation about the API, you can go to the documentation Bonitasoft website. Here you can go to the REST API documentation. And here you have like all the API. So you have the identity API. It's basically the one I just used to get a user, basically. So here we're good for the requestor. Then we are going to do the same thing than for the instantiation form, meaning that we're going to create a variable to handle the error. So here we have our empty error variable. We can get rid of the widget is approved. And what we want to do basically is display information about the request and then provide two buttons to either reject or approve the request. First, we're gonna change the name. We don't need it. Actually, we're gonna leave the display name and task description. It's good enough. And we are going to add a widget to display the requester. So for that, we're gonna add a text widget. Within our form. So I'm just gonna drag and drop my widget from here. And I'm going to copy directly the code from the exercise. So here I can remove what we have and add this one. So basically we go through our requestor variable and display the first name and the last name. Then we want to display the leaf start date. So we're gonna have another text widget. Same thing, I'm gonna remove the default value and add this one. Then we want to display the number of days. So I'm gonna have a third widget. Okay. And finally, we want to add a button to reject the request. So I'm gonna have a new button here. And I'm going to call it reject. I'm gonna make it center to the right. I'm gonna change the style to danger, so it's gonna be a red. And I'm gonna change the data sent on click to say that if this one is clicked, we're gonna send the variable is approved false. I'm going to store the answer here, error, and the target on URL is going to be Bonita. Then I need to modify the other button to display, to approve the request. So here it's going to be approve. We're going to say, we're going to choose center on the left. We're going to use the success style to make it green. We're going to send is approved. And we're going to store the error and send to Bonita. Okay. And finally, we're going to display the error. So same thing that we did on the instantiation form. We can remove the default value, and here we can make it dynamic, so we don't have to display. So yeah, it's a little bit more work in that case. So I'm gonna preview that thing. Okay, well, I'm gonna change the title here. It's gonna look better. Okay. So here we have a preview of our case. We can see that it shouldn't display them. I forgot one bracket here. So let me fix that. Okay, and that one. Okay, so now if I preview, yeah, it's all empty. But this is how the form will look like. Okay, so you see, yeah, it's a little bit more work to design the form, but still, to design a complete application is still pretty quick. And we are done. So we can test the process. So here I'm gonna save this guy, and I'm gonna run it. See how our form look like. So here is my instantiation form. I can choose now. Can use the widget, so it's easier than just typing the date, but you can still type the date if you want. Here I can add number of days, but let's say I enter a date in the past. Let's see what happened. So I should get the error from my contract. So here I got the error, so it's technical, but I could make it better. I could display just what I got in explanation. So again, it's up to the developer to format the error in a more user-friendly way. The engine will just return something really technical, and it will be up to the developer to make it look better. So to move on, I'm gonna choose a date in the future, and I'm going to submit it. Okay, now I can take the task, and here we see that we have information about the request. So Walter Bates created the request. It was on 14th of September for 12 days. I can either reject or approve it. Just to give you a little tip, what I like to use when I develop is the Google Chrome console. So here, by example, in the network tab, if I reload the frame, I can see all the requests going through, and I can basically look for the REST API call. So by example, I can here see what the engine returned for the business object. If I go to response here, I have the JSON version of my request object. If I go here, by example, I can see what is in the context. So if I never code and I don't want to access the documentation, I can just do a reverse engineering and just look at what is returned by the engine and then build my form based on that. So yeah, little tip that I use a lot to build my forms is basically looking at what's happening when I display my form. Good. Now I can approve my request. And we are done for this exercise. Let me see. I think I have one question here. So yeah, I have one question is, can I define dynamic iterations for a task? So yes, you can do that. It's basically on the studio side here. Here on the iteration part, you can define a different type of iteration. So it can be a standard loop. So you basically define a number of times the request will be executed. So if it's a human task, let's say you define a 5 loop, the user will have to submit the task 5 times before the case moves on. If it's an automatic task, the task will be executed 5 times and then the process will move on. You can have parallel multi-instantiation. In that case, you will have this task created 3 times, and the process will continue on the early completion condition returned true. So it can be by default that all the tasks are completed, or you can say, well, if you have 2 tasks or something happened, you continue. It's really interesting when you want to build process to handle voting. So you want to have a vote handled by, let's say, X user, by like, I don't know, 10 user, by example. You will multi-instantiate the vote task and wait for, let's say, maybe 70% of the person to vote before you move on and use the result of the vote to decide something else in the process. So hopefully that answers your question. Another question is, in BPM 2.0, is it possible to define a gateway based on events? We have gateways only based on business logic here, but you can technically implement that by using other events. You have, for example, message event or timer event. A message event will basically wait for a message, a BPMN message to come in, so you can have it through API or through another process. And when the message reach the event, it will start a new branch in your process, and you can link it in to a gateway in your process. And doing that, you can have your gateway based on events. Okay. If I don't have other question, I'm going to continue. So hopefully you all managed to get your form up and running, and we can move on with the next chapter, which is the actors. So now we have a basic process with 2 main tasks, one to fill the request, the other one is to validate the request. We have data, so we store the data in a separate database. We have a forms for the instantiation and for the validation. So we start to have something usable by real people. Now another big component of the application is the notion of actors. So what's behind an actor is basically decide who is going to handle what in my process. In the case of the leave request application, it's really simple. The employee will be able to initiate a new request, and their manager will be able to validate the request. So we have like two actors here, employee actors and managers actor. So how do we design that using the tooling provided by the Bonita platform? We use one of the 2 options available, whether the actor, or we can call it actor mapping, or the actor filters. So the first, the actor mapping, it's a mapping between the organization in Bonita. So again, Bonita manages on organization. The structure is pretty simple. It's users, group, and role. Basically, a user will belong to 0 or n, to 1 or n group, and for each group, it will have a role within that group. And basically, an actor mapping, you will say that this specific task can be handled by, let's say, this specific list of user, or this specific list of group, or this specific list of role, or any combination of that. It can be 5 users named distinctively, plus 3 groups, plus 2 roles in different groups. It can be a combination of any of that. What is interesting here with that approach is that even when the process is running and the task is ready to be executed, if the mapping change, the task will automatically reflect that mapping. By example, let's say you have a task sitting in the task list, and that task can be handled by any user of the group, I don't know, the group IT. For example, we have a team of IT engineers. They all belong to the same group, and they all are responsible for this task. Let's say you have a new employee joining that group. So you declare him as part of this group, and you want him to be able to directly start working on task. Using this approach, he will be able to do it because the mapping will be automatically taken in account by the existing task. That's the first approach. Second approach is the actor filters. In that case, it's a dynamic approach. So basically, we're gonna design or code a piece of logic to declare who is candidate to a task. So if I take again the example of the leave request, on the validate request task, we want only the manager of the person who initiates the request to be able to access this task. So it cannot be done by the actor mapping because we don't know in advance what are the employees who are going to initiate the request. So it can be done with the actor filter. And the actor filter will basically use the information of the requester ID to look in the organization for the manager and add this person to the list of candidates for this specific task. The limitation with this approach is that this actor filter is executed only once at the instantiation of the task, meaning that if the list of candidates returned by your logic change after the task has been executed, it won't be automatically updated for this task. You will have the option, however, to run again the actor filter using an API. So it can be done. Hopefully it's clear. I know it's a lot of information for the actors, but again, we're gonna have an example highlighting the two approach in the exercise that come out right now. So here we go. So that one is really easy. I will give you about 5 minutes to do it. It basically defines two actors. One for it's to create two lanes first, and then create validator actor and initiator actor, and define the actor filter to retrieve the manager of a specific person. So again, if you didn't manage to finish the exercise previously, I will recommend to import the correction and duplicate it to start creating the version 4.0. I will give you about 5 minutes to do that one. I'm gonna take 1 minute to answer a question I have, which is for the purposes of work assignment or task assignment to actors. Can actor be a group of individuals such that the task is assigned to the group and then assigned to a group member in that group based on a differentiator such as existing workload, job location, skill set, etc. So yes, but in that case, it will be all handled by the actor filter. So in the actor filter, you can create your own actor filter and write your own logic. Basically, we'll retrieve the information of the group and then code basically that logic on the actor filter. Out of the box, you won't be possible to do it with the actor mapping because it doesn't go to the level of existing workload, job execution, or stuff like that. But it can be done with the actor filter. Okay, let's go to the correction. So I'm gonna create number 4. I'm gonna duplicate that guy. Okay. And we are going to do the actors. So what we have to do is basically add a new lane. So I have my new diagram here. Oops. Okay. I'm gonna add a new lane. And I'm gonna call it validator. Okay. Oops, my bad. I selected the wrong thing. That's the lane I want. Oh. Okay. So I renamed the lane, and I renamed the other one to requester. Okay. So now I have two names. Then I'm gonna drag and drop the task validate request to the lane validator, and add a initiator manager filter on the validator line. So I'm gonna select this lane, go to the actors, and here I'm gonna select the employee actor and click on set to choose my initiator manager actor filter. I'm going to call it requester manager and assign the task automatically. Great. So yeah, I used one of the out-of-the-box actor filters that basically return the manager of the initiator, so really handy for that use case. You can obviously create your own actor filter. If you go to the menu that I can't display here for some reason, but you go to development, actor filter, and you can create your own actor filter, and there you can build the logic of doing whatever you want. The only thing you have to respect is return a list of user ID that exists in the Bonita organization, because of course the engine will be able to assign a task only to users that exist in the organization that he manages. Okay, and we are good to go. So I can run it. So by default, I am connected as Walter Bates. So if you have doubts, I can just show you here. So here I am Walter Bates. I can come here and start a new instance of that leave request. So I'm gonna choose a date and a number of days. And in the task, I have nothing. But if I connect as Ellen Kelly, who is the manager of Walter Bates, I have one task, which is validate the request for Walter Bates. You will notice that I don't have to grab the task; it's automatically assigned to Ellen Kelly, because yes, actor filter will return only one candidate. So in that case, we assign automatically the task to that person, and I can approve the task. Great. That one was really easy. Let's move to the next one. So how we are going to notify our employee. For that, we're gonna use connectors. So connectors is a key feature in the Bonita BPM platform that allows you to basically connect the diagram with other external system. So it can be anything that expose API or that is accessible through any means. So by example, it can be send an email. So you will send an email. It can be accessing a web service or REST API. It can be getting data from a database or pulling data from a database. Any connection that you can imagine that can be coded can be integrating through a connector. So to help the development of processes, by default, we provide the standard library of connectors to realize the most common actions. Again, in the community edition, we have a limited number of connectors. If you take the subscription edition, we have way more advanced connectors available. And as the spirit of this platform, we are really open. So we have tooling to create your own custom connectors. You will have to have some notion in Java and integration system to make sure you know how to integrate the system you want. But it can be implemented directly in the studio. You have tooling in the studio to create new connectors, or you can use your Java IDE, and you can also browse the community websites. We have a lot of open source contributor who created connectors and share them with the community, so you can just download them, test them, and use them. And thanks also the contributor if you do that. All right, so let's take a look to how it actually look like in a real exercise. So in that case, we are going to send an email to the requester. Let's take a look to this exercise. Why I cannot move anymore? Okay. All right. So we're gonna use a connector to send an email. So you can either use your favorite SMTP server, like Gmail or any SMTP server that you have. In my case, I use a fake SMTP server that runs on my machine. So I basically send mail to my own. So that looks like that. I have this guy. It's a fake SMTP server. I can choose a port, let's say 2525, and start the server. And now I can use that as my SMTP server, and I will see the email that goes through. So it's up to you. You can use a fake SMTP server, or if you have your own SMTP server, you can use that one. It's up to you. So same thing, I will give you about 5 to 10 minutes to do that, and then I will walk you through the correction. All right, while you're doing the exercise, I'm going to take a minute to answer a question. So the question is, let's say I have a field in the first form where I enter manually the name of a user that is going to approve the request. And I want to have the next task assigned to that user. So basically, it will be an actor filter. So in the studio, here you will create your own actor filter. So I'm going to take a minute to show you how you can quickly create maybe an actor filter. So you have to go to development. So again, I can't show you the thing, but let's see, maybe first I have an actor filter that does that. Yeah, single user. Perfect, actually, it's even easier. So here I can use a single user, say a single user. I don't have a good imagination for the name, but here you can just provide the user ID. And you can imagine that you store the ID of the user in the BDM. In that case, I will return the ID of the user directly from the BDM object. And the actor filter will execute that code, return that ID, and assign the task to that specific user. So really easy to do. Hopefully that answers the question. Okay, let's do the correction for this exercise. So I'm going to duplicate that diagram. So let's duplicate it, create the version 5.0. And we're gonna add the connectors to send emails. So first, let's take the instruction. First, we want to create the test email connector. So I'm gonna navigate to a bit annoying development connectors and test connector. So here you can see all the connectors available. They are all sorted by category. So we have REST connector, database connectors, and so on. In my case, I want to use the email connector. So I'm gonna click on next. I'm gonna name it nothing. Don't need to provide a name. Just gonna provide the right information. So the SMTP server is running on my machine on the port 2525. I have no SSL, and I can click on next. I'm gonna add a test address for the tests. They don't need to be linked to anything that exists. I'm gonna click on next. Say Bonita test as a subject, and we're gonna click on test. So I just have to choose nothing. We don't need any dependency, and hopefully we get an email. So let's take, yes, here I have my email. Perfect. So that works. I can clear that one. Yes. Okay. And now I can save this configuration here. I'm gonna email config and click on finish. Now I can close that thing. Now we want to add two connectors. So one for when we reject and one for when we approve. Let's start by adding a connector on the approve task. So you select the task, you go to execution, and here you can choose where you want the connector to be executed, either in or out. So in, it means when the task is created. So when you reach the task, and the connector will be executed, and out it's when the task is submitted and the contract has passed and everything. Before we move to the next thing in the process, we will actually execute the connector. You can declare multiple connectors in and out, and they will be executed in order of appearance. So let's add a connector in the in. Doesn't really matter because this task doesn't make anything else. So we add an email connector that we're gonna call send request approved email. Okay, I click on next, and here I can load the correction. So I'm just gonna select my email config, and hopefully all the parameters will be pre-filled, and now I can just change the one I want. So here I'm gonna say HR. So the HR will send the email, and for the two, I want to find the email of my requester. So we go to the script, and here we're gonna rename the script. So basically here we can actually write a Groovy script to code any logic. So here I'm gonna use method helper, the Bonita users. We're gonna get the information of the initiator that provide the API accessor and the process instance. and I get the email. So it's an helper. Here you can see we have a provided variable. So API accessor is basically a helper to get all the API exposed by the engine, and we have all the variables that you might use in your script. And here we have all the variables managed by the process. Okay, I'm actually gonna return that thing. Okay. All right, and the next one is change the subject to leave request approved and click on finish. Perfect. Now let's do the same for this one. The only difference is that it's going to be send request rejected email. Okay, we're going to load the configuration. Yes, we're going to change who it's from. We're going to change to get the get requestor email. So basically we do the same thing. I'm gonna return that thing. And we're gonna change the subject to say leave request rejected. Okay. So we're done for the email. We can now test the process. So I can run this guy. Here, I'm gonna have my, so that one is empty. I'm gonna start a new request saying that for tomorrow I want 12 days of vacation. I need to connect as Ellen Kelly to validate or reject. And I'm going to reject who takes 12 days of vacation on 1 day notice. We're gonna reject that. So here we go. We get an email to welder base. Sorry, you cannot take your vacation. So here we go. Really easy to put in place and really interesting. Okay, now I don't need this one anymore. Let's go back to the theory, to the slides. So one of the last chapter is the BPM-based application. That's really what we ultimately want to do. Building process is nice. It's good, and it provides a good value for your business. Building an application that will actually combine different processes, build pages, provide a report on the execution of those processes, which is an actual business application, will actually be a real plus for you. So see how we can do that. So as I said, we're going to combine processes together to handle a real business use case. The application, they respect, in our case, the MVC design pattern. If you're not familiar with it, is basically the model view controller. So it's a separation of concerns. The model, in our case, will be the business data model. The business data model will be transversal to a set of processes. The view is a combination of pages and process forms. And the controller part, which is the business logic, will be the set of processes that hold the logic of our application. The applications are deployed and hosted in the Bonita portal. So in that exercise, we're going to create a leave request application. So basically, we will have an application for the user to create and manage their leave request. We're going to create a one-page app where we'll be able to review all the requests created by a user. So that one is a bit long. I will give you about 10 minutes to do it, and then I will walk you through the correction. All right, hopefully you got time to finish this exercise. We're gonna take time together to walk through it. So basically, we don't need to duplicate the process because we're not gonna modify it. So we're going straight to the UI designer. So I'm going to put this guy over there. And I'm going to refresh the UI designer. So here it is. You can go back to the home page using that button. Or with the studio, you can just click on UI designer and it will bring you to the same place. So here, we're gonna create a new page called leave request status. Now click on create. Leave request status or leave request one page app, it's up to you. We're gonna change the title, so we're gonna add a title. So we're gonna find the title widget and bring it here. Call it leave request application. Okay, we're gonna center this one and we can save. Then we're gonna add another title below, calling leave request status. We're gonna center and make it smaller. Then we're gonna create a variable to store the session information. We're gonna call it session info, and it's basically an API to get the information about the current logged in user. So you just have to know it, and you can find it if you open the portal with the Chrome debugger. You can see the request. So you have information about the user. Then we're going to create a variable to list the leave requests. We're going to call it leave request status. And I'm going to copy from the exercise the URL. Okay, make sure we're fine here. We have a space here. So here, interesting, we are calling the API to access the BDM, and we are calling a specific query called find by requester ID, and plus other parameter, and these are defined here. In the studio, if you open the development tab for the business process management, sorry, if you go to manage here, you can see here the queries, and we have the find by requester ID. And if you double click on it, you can see the different parameter requester ID. So just so you know, you can directly query the BDM through the REST API. Then we're gonna define a new JavaScript expression to prepare the list. We're gonna call it update leave request status. It's gonna be a JavaScript expression. Okay, so basically we format the text to display what we want. Then we are going to define the UI part. So add a container, and we are going to tie this container to the leave request status variable. So it's a list. So basically, this container will be repeat for each element on my list. And we're going to add 4 widgets. So the first one is the input, to basically build a table. So we have this one is going to be read-only. The label is going to be name. And the value is going to be index plus 1. So the index will be returned by the container. Then we're going to add a date picker. So again, it's going to be 3. This is going to be read-only. It's going to be the start date and item dot leave start. So in that case, my item is going to be the current element on my list. And show today button, nope. Okay. Then another input. It's going to be 3 again. It's going to be yes. The label is going to be number of days. And the value is going to be $item dot day count. Okay. And finally, another widget. Another input. This one is going to be read-only. The name is going to be status. And the value is going to be $item dot is approved label. Okay, so now we have our table ready. We can preview. We have no elements. Say, oh, that's a good one. So basically, what happened here is that when I preview, the REST API will be executed. And since I'm connected to the portal in the same browser, the API actually return result because I'm connected to my Bonita portal. So I can actually test the page against real data from my Bonita portal. So that's a good example. Now I can export the page and use it later. I'm going to use it now actually. I'm going to import the page. So I'm going to close a few tabs here. Going to go to my portal, connect as an administrator, and import my page. So I go to resources, and I add the page that I just created. So it's right here. Okay, so I imported my page. Now I can create a new application. Click on new. So I'm going to call my application leave request app. It's going to be a leave request. Here we can choose a profile who can access this application. And here I can edit my application. So by default, it will be the default home application page. And you can see that you have a unique URL to access this page, this application. But we don't want the default home page, so we're going to use the page that we just created. So I'm going to add it here, my page. So I select it, I call it, where I put status. I declare it as home page and I remove this one. So here, I can actually have my application directly already here. So at this point, the exercise is done. You can, if you have time, later, I give an extension of the exercise to practice where you can actually display, create new requests directly from the application. I won't have time today. I want to take the time to wrap up and give you time for questions if you have any. But you see, it's pretty easy to create application, and it makes the application look pretty good. All right, let's go through the last part of the slides, which is the deployment. Just before I go to that, no, I'm gonna go through that part first, and I will go back to the application deployment at the end. So basically, when you want to deploy what does that mean? We saw that in the studio you can develop all the components of your application. You have your business data model, you have the processes, you have the pages, you have the applications, a lot of different artifacts. But how do you make that available in production? So usually in production, you will have no studio. Studio is just for development, but you will have a standalone instance of your Bonita portal. So it can be deployed on a dedicated server that run Tomcat or Wildfly. We provide bundle, so it's like pre-configured application server ready to be deployed. And all those portal you will connect, create your own organization, and define with the administrator, and deploy the artifact of your application. So first, in the studio, you can export the boss file. So here, you will have to come here. So again, I cannot show you the menu because I have an issue with my screen sharing, but if you select your process, you can go to server build. It will open this window, and here you can choose the process you want to export and click on finish. And using that artifact, you go to the portal and deploy it. Before I open for question, I just want to mention something. Since 7.5 actually, we have directly in the studio the ability to build application. So if you go to development application, you can actually import an application, let's say. Let's say if I have one, yeah. And it will look like that. So with the community edition, it doesn't really help. It helps for one thing, to centralize the descriptor of your application in the repository of the studio. With the subscription edition, you have the ability to define completely the application in the studio, and you can deploy the application and all the dependencies directly from the studio. So it helps a lot because you will end up building applications that are composed of multiple pages, processes, also REST API extension. I didn't mention that, but you can extend the REST API provided by the engine. And using that functionality will help a lot to deploy your application. So I just wanted to mention that because I did a focus on the BPM Camp on how to deploy the process. But if you want to go a step further, we actually want to deploy application, and there is more things to it. All right, that's all for me. I want to thank you for your attention. I know it's a long session, 3 hours and a half. Hopefully you learned a lot today. You have now a good understanding of what you can do with the Bonita BPM platform, how you can build an easy, simple process to a simple or complicated application. The range, the scope is pretty wide. It's up to you to build your own thing now. If you want to know more, obviously there is a documentation available. I'll encourage you a lot to go check it out. You can go to the corporate website to see our events and download the new version of Bonita. Don't hesitate to come say hi to the community. We have an active forum where you can ask your question or help other Bonitasoft members with their issues. And finally, we have two GitHub. Actually, we have a GitHub corporate where you can find a lot of resources. And we actually also have a GitHub for the community. Let me show you quickly. Here on the community, you have the Docker image. You have like a lot of content built by the community members. You have examples and so on. So don't hesitate to look for information, content, and in any doubt, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. Again, thanks for attending the session today. I will present new webinars before the end of the year, so hopefully I will see you on those webinars. Have a great day or a great night, depending where you are in the world, and I see you soon. Bye-bye.